It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hog Sty Network, the show where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports media business industrial monolith. How you doing today, Steve?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. You had a weird inflection on it's
You gotta mess it up. You gotta mess with it
it's
sometimes.
just business.
Yeah, you gotta be goofy.
Are you over mourning the death of the Prince of Darkness?
It was quite sad. I'm an Ozzy fan. So yeah, it was sad. It was remarkable how fast it was after that concert, which we talked about, which was only I think 2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Yeah.
So yeah, talk about your well-timed farewell, your farewell concert. You couldn't have asked for well, obviously you don't want to die, but you couldn't have asked for a better timing there.
Well, listen, if you gotta go, there's no better way to go out than that.
Yeah.
So I just think he survived. It was remarkable he survived as long as he did, considering the enormous amount of abuse he did to his body. And I think he did his farewell, and his body just quit. That was it.
It reminds me. I don't know how many. This really aged me, but there used to be a comic strip, which people don't even know what those are anymore as a genre. Really, there used to be a comic strip called Bloom County.
I remember that. Yeah, Bloom County.
And they did an hysterical Ozzy storyline. Then they had Bill the Cat be kind of the Ozzy stand-in, but then they also had Ozzy too. And there's this great. I was kind of digging around the internet and found this great panel from one of the strips where it's Ozzy turning his back to the audience as they chant Ozzy, and his thought bubble is, thank God for long guitar solos, as he basically catches his breath. So, he really did TV shows, the whole thing. He penetrated pop culture in a way that few do.
I think I told my Ozzy story on the Hogsty, but I'll tell it here too. So I've said here before that I was a roadie for a while, and I worked a whole bunch of concerts, and I was less of a roadie. I was a theater tech, is more accurately stated. And one band that came through there was called Badlands, which I bet you Chris knows, but many people probably
vaguely
don't. That is Jake E. Lee's old band, which Jake E. Lee was Ozzy's guitarist after Randy Rhoads. And so at one point we were done with the stage setup and just waiting for them to show up to do a sound check. And I was just talking to the guitar tech, and I was like, listen, did Ozzy really bite the head off a bat? Did that actually happen? And the guy said, I was there. Yeah. He'd been with Jake forever. He was like his longtime guitar tech. And he said Ozzy was out of his mind, obviously. But thought the audience threw something up to the stage, and he didn't even look at it or have the capacity to look at it in his drugged out mind. And he just instinctively just bit it because he thought it wasn't. He didn't even know it was a bat. But that apparently, from that firsthand account, that did actually happen. Apparently, because that's a thing of legend at this point.
Oh, when I was a late elementary, middle school kid, that was like one of the biggest urban legends going.
Well, I got a first.
Maybe not urban legend.
No, I got a first-hand account from the guitar tech for his guitarist, who was there watching the whole thing happen. We had another, pop culture death too, though.
Yes, a similar transcending of pop culture awareness past, beyond their initial realm in Hulk Hogan.
I have not followed Hulk Hogan in recent years. I was not aware that he had a bunch of health issues. Apparently he had a whole lot of health issues, and I guess that's what happens when you do 40 years of steroids.
Yeah.
Most likely.
Yeah. In fact, he lived 20 years beyond guys like John Matusak and Lyle Alzado, who were sort of like peers of the era of just gargantuan steroid use, as well as other wrestlers that are all died way earlier than Hulk Hogan.
And did not Lyle Alzado have other drug problems? I may be subscribing him something that.
Whether he did or not, I can't say. But they did say the cause of death was
steroids. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. But rest in peace to Hulk Hogan. I guess he was estranged from his daughter, apparently, which is sad.
In fact, they both were partial. partially famous, especially in later years, for having
She was
reality
a
shows.
yeah. Well, and she
Both
was a wrestler in her own
Osbourne's
right. Yeah.
and Hogan's. And Ozzy's family survived. No, maybe didn't survive is the wrong word, but they stayed remained intact. But that TV show destroyed the Hogans.
Yes, and the daughter ended up being a wrestler, but somehow got crosswise with her father over
Yeah,
I don't know what.
I don't
Yeah, I don't
remember.
know.
The behind the scenes narrative of Hulk Hogan is quite interesting. We talked about the Mr. McMahon series. The other, he ratted out the possible unionization. He and Jesse the Body Ventura hadn't talked since that day. That so there's all his involvement in the Peter Thiel led Gawker lawsuit is fascinating.
Yes, that is
So
crazy.
there, I mean, and there's a whole bunch more. So we've just, this family, the reality show, the Gawker lawsuit, how wrestlers hate him, and he was McMahon's, snitch. So and that's just the greatest hits. Hulk Hogan led a wild life.
Yeah, he did, and I think the summary of the Gawker lawsuit, if I recall, was that the guy behind Gawker had a sex tape, like an illicitly filmed sex tape of Hogan and somebody, and like leaked the tape or something, and that was what the lawsuit was about. I think something like that,
I
if I
think that
recall.
was the crux of the lawsuit, but
Yeah,
the behind the scenes machinations are Peter Thiel, PayPal money, now Palantir,
and it wasn't so
financier.
much that like Hogan filmed himself. It was like there was a camera in a room illicitly placed. Was the
Yes,
issue?
but Peter Thiel was looking to destroy the publisher of Gawker for
Right.
years, and so he used Hulk Hogan and what may or may, I mean obviously they won their case, legitimate case with the sex tape and all of that, but it was completely financed, paid for, and was the instrument of destruction, like revenge best served cold situation by Peter
and
Thiel.
it ended Gawker.
Yes, essentially. I mean, I think it's a ghost brand out there like Sports Illustrated, but yes, and Gawker Media, really more importantly.
Sports Illustrated at least publishes a magazine still, though.
I think up until just recently, there was still web properties that had the Gawker brand.
Really,
Yeah.
yeah.
It destroyed Gawker Media though, and then they sold Gawker and other things for pennies on the dollar.
But both those guys obviously led wild, crazy lives,
Yeah, yes,
for sure.
and transcended their what made them famous to a pretty
Well, I
massive
mean,
level.
Hogan really kind of stumbled on a character that was sort of like a '80s Yeehaw America sort of character.
Yeah, that
That
persisted.
yeah, right. That persisted, but if he had invented a different character, the whole thing might have been totally different.
And
you
he
know,
and he had those weird years in the NWA where he was kind of like the flashy bad guy when he was in exile from the WWF
yeah.
slash E. So but even that didn't. I mean, it obviously kept him relevant enough, but it was not the same.
No, no, no. So
So
rest in peace to both those guys. And I know that Hogan's daughter put something out that said, she had told him she loved him or something recently. So hopefully all of that was settled before he died.
well, there we go. So some notable pop culture deaths there. But we'll get into the meat and potatoes here. Um, the long march to a new stadium for the Washington football team on the old RFK site had I think did some has been lurching towards and took a step, although it's always twists and turns. And we now know there will be, to my understanding, is the first of two votes. First one being August 1st, and it would seem like because this is not like this is a self-imposed vote, right? Like that, and they made the timing. This wasn't so. This is clear that to me anyway that you have the votes if you call for a vote. That's generally rule of a golden rule in any kind of legislative body.
Well, yeah, yes. I mean, they're not going to put most city council votes are pro forma.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's already worked out
And this wasn't
ahead of
even
time.
like a part of their calendar where they were going to do a bunch of voting. This is a special date to do this vote.
And we always knew. And listen, I mean, stadiums are complicated. So all of these deals have setbacks and, lurches back and forth. This one maybe is more complicated because the District of Columbia and the federal government's involved. But none of this is really new. And like a debate over where is the city going to find $1 billion in public financing is not new.
No.
That's a debate that every city and state should have, and it's a proposal that every state and city should reject outright. In my view, I continue to believe that not 1 cent of public funds should be spent on a stadium in which you're going to give the vast bulk of the profits to a multi-billionaire who owns a team in one of the most profitable and largest sports leagues in the world. I think that's bad business. It's a violation of the public trust. But so what has apparently happened is that the team and the District of Columbia have negotiated the basic outline slash structure of how the stadium deal is going to go forward. And so, yes, they have set a vote for, I believe it was at August 1st, I
Yeah.
believe. Yeah. Um, and so that's that. And yes, they're going to have another vote later because they're going to have to approve bonds. The only way cities can raise this kind of money is issuing bonds, government bonds. And basically the bond in simple terms is an investment vehicle issued by a government in which they say we will guarantee you this much return in exchange for a payment up front of this much, and then the state, of course, or the government has to pay the bonds back over time. But it's seen as far more stable than just typical investments because the government's involved. So that's bonds. I was going to go down the next rabbit hole in this, but your thoughts on this part?
Uh, avoiding rabbit holes or just even the generic complexity or added complexity of the federal government's involvement with the governance of Washington, D.C. This all seems I agree is very normal. That these the August 1st isn't I mean, here's the everyone that wants this can breathe a sigh of relief when they do the shovel ceremony, and they break ground. That's when everyone, yeah, that's when you, but until then, these are all things that are going to happen with deals this big. And so it's not a final vote on August 1st, but I think it's very significant. And I think getting through the city council, which I think the second vote will be, will need to happen, but I think will skate through most likely. Then getting past the city council is a massive step here, just like getting the lease deal on the land was a massive step. I mean, we talked for years about this, about like what hurdles they'd have to get past, and these are the hurdles.
Miraculously enough, they've gotten past it. By the way, there was a story on this. There were a couple stories. So the one I'm looking at is excuse me. DC is from Front Office Sports. DC nears Commander Stadium vote amid Trump's name push by Eric Fisher, July 23rd, 2025. And it does mention that the deal in total is 3.8 billion, and the amount of the government bonds financing is 1.1 billion. That leaves about 2.7 billion approximately for the Washington ownership group to raise, and that'll most likely come in the form of construction financing in the vast bulk of it. Probably they'll have to have an equity injection, but most of that is financing. It'll be spread out over the term of the lease. And the numbers typically always work out in this, where the projected income from the stadium will pay the debt service and enough still for the team to make a profit. So that's how it works. But it only works out because of the bond financing. And again, that's the part that I'm a real, when it comes to government financing, I'm a real budget hawk. And I think all governments need to do a vastly better job of managing public funds. But I've already said enough here. So, okay. So the rabbit hole in this thing, and I swear we're not trying to be political, but it is part of the story. And we just say up front, Chris and I have different political views, and but that's not what we're here for. So Donald Trump, the president, um, made a statement. It looks like on what's his
Truth Social.
Yes, Truth Social, in which he, in his own unique Donald Trump way, advocated slash demanded that Washington change the name of the team back to Redskins, and then that the Cleveland Guardians change the name back to Indians. And in the statement, which I don't have in front of me, I don't really want to read the whole, it was long, but he stated outright that he might hold up the stadium deal unless Washington changes the name of the team. Now, the president does not have the authority to do this. Okay, everybody relax on that point. He cannot by fiat issue some type of executive order and kill the stadium deal. There is a bill passed by Congress in which the bill orders the property to be ground leased to the DC for a purpose of development. And it would take an action of Congress to just turn that off. He cannot just issue an executive order. He's done this a lot in his second tenure, and some of them got kicked out by courts because he doesn't have the authority to do what he thinks he can. He can maybe hold up some approval processes, but that's about it. So it's much ado about nothing. It's Donald Trump being Donald Trump, which is to say trolling the world, either that or just spouting off whatever nonsense comes into his mind. But it's not serious. That's my thought. Your thoughts?
I mean, I don't really fundamentally disagree with any of that analysis. I'd argue that he's been more successful than the legal parameters would suggest at these things. So, we'll see. But that's how it should work. He shouldn't have any say over this. I think Eric Flack, the DC reporter, I think he's on Channel 9, local affiliate in the DC area, has been sort of on this, from a real kind of investigating, reporting it on the story now for a couple of years, really. And he did point out a couple things. One, he could at least be a monkey in a monkey, whatever. He could be a fly in the ointment. There's a good cliche.
He could be a monkey in the ointment.
Yeah, he could be a monkey. Yes, he could be a monkey in the ointment. That's actually well said with him. And at least try to disrupt that lease, which then would get pulled into courts because he would get immediately sued and stuff like that. So there's a slowdown process, right? They're just like throwing junk in front of something to slow it down, but he could do. Yes. And then also there is there is a federal commission. I think it's called the Fine Arts Commission.
Well, that's it. That's another slowdown mechanism. That commission is going to have to approve it somehow.
Right. So there are levers of slowdown at his disposal. So, I mean, it's not, that stuff's not crazy. I'd actually argue that him wading in to this actually probably sped up the city council. So I think that got them, because it was like, well, we'll see. We have votes. We don't know. Now, obviously, that's the back channel negotiation for the parking and the food money, et cetera, right, for the financing deal. But I do think when he weighed in here, the city council acted faster than they may have wanted to. So that to me is interesting already. What are the secondary and tertiary effects of these kind of moves? But I think here ultimately why I think I would add on to you it doesn't matter evidence is that was a trial balloon to change a public narrative that is not going well for the president vis-a-vis Epstein. And we've seen 2 or 3 things since then, and it didn't hold. No one gave a good grief about this at a national level. I know people in the DMV get all of the tizzy, but that's a highly parochial story. This did not slow down and, even take 3 to 5 stories off the front page. This did not have any kind of ripple effect and was not the kind of thing that it was meant to do, and he's already moved on to 3 or 4 things since. So I think this idea that even at the bully pulpit level, even at the I'm going to stomp my feet and gum up the works, I think he's past it because I don't think it had legs.
Yeah, I don't. Donald Trump's a smart guy. I don't think he really thought this was going to end up being a national story, because it's abundantly clear that the president cannot order professional sports teams to change names. And it was always so much like this Canada being the 51st state thing. He's not serious. He was never serious about any of it. It's just, I think it's him spouting off in the middle of the night or whatever, on a thought that came to his head. So I get what you're saying. I think he's got other means to get people off the Epstein story. I think this is just something that popped into his head. We can disagree with that. We have different opinions about that. That's totally fine. But the point is, what we both agree on is this is not a thing. Could he at most hold up the process? Sure. But he can't just order or terminate a ground lease without action of Congress. And that's the point. That's the real point.
Yeah,
It's just
although
like contemplating.
he seemed to be able to do things that that had already broken those rules. Now, yes, and the courts have caught up with him in a number of those cases and stuff. So like it goes through a process. But you know, if people had bitten on it, he'd continue to put it out there.
Maybe. I mean, we're going down a political rabbit hole now that I don't really want to go down.
I mean, is it political? I mean, it seems pretty clear.
yeah, I don't. I just don't agree with you that this is a strategy because he's a very in the moment guy.
So he's
He
either
was
really dumb or or really smart.
well. I think he's a smart guy. I don't think he's a brilliant guy. He's not Einstein. He does have good political instincts, at least within his kind of universe. But again, I think he puts out a lot of things that are just the thought that it's in his head right at the moment, and that comes out. I don't think he's a strategy guy. You very much. He might have been thinking about team names. Gosh, it's horrible that Commanders are, Washington Redskins are gone. And it's now the stupid Commanders and the Indians, and he put out something, and that's the end of it. I think it's not. I think that's the Occam's razor. Easiest answer is the right answer. I think that applies here.
Okay, yeah, he's really dumb. I'll accept that.
I didn't say that. I said he has a history of
Of
putting out
saying
thoughts that
stupid,
pop into his head.
inconsequential stuff. Okay.
Or he
Okay,
does it
I will accept that, Steve. He has a history of saying stupid and inconsequential stuff at inappropriate times that
a
aren't
lot
linked
of
to
it
what his
is
power is.
a lot
Yes,
of
I
it.
agree. I agree. We
I
have
didn't say
agreement.
that. I
We
I
agree.
think a lot of what he does is intentional to just troll people because it entertains him. And I'm not a big
So
Trump fan. I want
I
people to
know, but
understand this.
I just still would define all
I
those
didn't
things.
call him dumb though.
I would define all those things as stupid. Um, okay,
We have a
so
different opinion.
I
For
agree.
shock of shocks, we have a different opinion about politics.
I actually don't think we do, but that's another thing. But yes, I do agree that I think it's relatively toothless, and he won't return to it. But I could be
No,
easily wrong
no, I
because,
think you're right about that. He's not going to come back to it.
but I would now, he does have a recent Trump appointee as a head of the board or whatever governing body for that Fine Arts Commission.
As is
So
appropriate. I mean, he is,
right, but so I mean, he doesn't necessarily have to have his name attached for the work to be
well,
gummed up. Yeah,
that's what my point is. I mean, he could tell that board chairman to,
slow
you know,
everything down. Yeah.
right.
So
But it's not going to stop it.
if like I said, if you're holding your breath, which you should, until the shovel ceremony that officially breaks ground on construction, then this would that this is a reason to
Well,
continue to hold your breath.
yeah, and here's where we end with this. Nobody hates the name Commanders more than me. It's totally ruined my fandom. I hate the name Commanders. It's not going away. And even if it did, the NFL is way too politically correct to ever go back to Redskins. It is no matter what anybody says, it is never going to happen. There is a 0.0% chance that Josh Harris changes his name back to Redskins, much to my great chagrin and disappointment, but it will never happen.
I mean that's as evident as anything to me.
Yes, the NFL is way too woke and PC for that.
Um, and well, I actually even argue that all of this like fighting fights that are not are silly is actually just slows down. I think the team's obvious move towards embracing much of that, and I think you're even going to see the logo used on ceremonial helmets next year. So like actually making those kind of longer term connections this kind of I think endlessly debating something that is like not going to happen. It's like flying cars. Kind of slows
Flying
down.
cars may happen. Don't. That's
fair
not
point.
a good analogy.
Fair point. Yes. Just I think I don't know. Trust Josh Harris. I think he understands enough of this to at least heal some of the wounds. But
Well,
whatever.
I will
That's emo
never,
territory.
ever forgive them for destroying the name Redskins and picking the all-time stupidest name.
Well, that has
as a
nothing to do with
replacement.
anybody that's in the building.
I get it. I know, but I
Yeah,
just want to
so
make that point again because
right,
I
but
have to.
I know, but like
They also couldn't care less about my opinion because I'm too old,
um
and so are you.
yeah, I know. Um I actually had a wow, I'm old moment I'll share here. We're talking about replacing the the Landover Stadium, FedEx, Northwest, whatever. The Eagles actually have started to say they want a new stadium, the which to me, both these stadiums aren't that old. I remember I went to a game at the link, its opening season, and I was an adult.
When was
Like,
it? What year was that?
that's probably like 97, 98, maybe
Almost 30 years
2000.
ago.
Yeah, right. So like so we're talking about, so here's these two like, legendary franchises and big East Coast cities with a lot of NFL history, and we're already looking to replace stadiums that I, vividly remember when they were opened with fanfare.
I went to the second game at FedEx Field, which was in Jack Kent Cooke Stadium, I believe.
Right. So here we are. We're already replacing these behemoths 30 years later. Well, there you go. All right, Steve, we've got, man, there is a lot of court intrigue going on here at the NFL Players Association union. Lloyd Howe, we talked about in our last show, I believe, and some of the trouble he was in, and so on and so forth. And we don't want to relitigate all this. This goes back to, although we're beyond this now, I think it goes back to the collusion, not collusion, and the Deshaun Watson, whatever. Go listen to past episodes if you want updates on that. But that sort of began the sunlight here. And then we predicted some version of this would happen. Like 4 or 5 days later, he resigned, and now all the dirt is flowing. And even how this guy got the job, and now they got to replace him, so that becomes under the microscope. And it just came out from ESPN, Don Van Natta, probably the best sports investigative reporter working on the earth right now. That there are possible criminal charges coming about a whole bunch of misappropriation of funds by Hal, and the who takes over leadership is Game of Thrones situation.
Yeah, there's a couple stories on here. One I'm looking at right now is ESPN called "If He Failed, Their Process Failed: Inside the NFLPA Meltdown" by Don Van Natta, dated July 23rd. And this is really, really, really long story. So get your popcorn out. First of all, Lord Howell seems to me to be kind of a typical big time executive, probably good at what he good at making a lot of maneuverings to get what he wants, and
Yeah.
with a bit of corruption behind him, and a lot of ego that allows him to do things like bill $2,000 car rides to strip clubs to his employer, which is part of the allegation here. Normal people don't do things like that, but when you are a career long executive that people kowtow to, this is the kind of thing you do. But okay, so the point here, that the big point is that the allegation of corruption against Howell. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's start with the election. Apparently the election of Lloyd Howell was done in very closed fashion, so it appears, and that the players were not aware of the full scope of Howell's background and the allegations against him, which include a sexual discrimination lawsuit. Sexual discrimination as opposed to sexual misconduct. Sexual discrimination would mean that somehow he treated a female differently than a male for purposes of employment in the workplace, as opposed to misconduct. There was that, but then there's also an allegation of corruption wherein the board of a company he was on magically got a giant contract with the union, and that is where the probably where some of the criminal investigations are stemming from, because I could picture some sort of collusion, money laundering, type stuff. The NLRB is mentioned in here as being involved, and NLRB is historically very, very, very pro union. So the fact that they are looking into this tells me that they're probably trying to protect the union by going after a corrupt leader, probably. But there is a lot more to come on this. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's, this is one of those things where everyone's going to forget all about the collusion lawsuit by the time this freight train gets
That's
rolling.
just
The
that was
the
the
Big Bang
entree
moment.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is wild. First of all, going back to how he got the position, which that JC Treader seems to be the kind of worm tongue behind most of this, and is now out at the players union, and he was an ex-player. So he's been the sort of Svengali and was the sort of one that spearheaded. But But Howell had never worked in labor, had never been involved with sports,
He was a
and
corporate guy.
was run at not only was run out of Booz Allen in their giant scandal. So he was, left Booz Allen in disgrace.
Can you give the 10-second version of the Booz Allen scandal?
No,
I can't remember either. I was hoping you
it,
would remember. I couldn't
but
remember what it is either.
we can look it up. But it basically was corporate malfeasance fallout.
It's something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't remember
and
what
he
it
had a
is.
strip club. He had a strip club problem at Booz Allen as well. So when all the dirt comes out there were also similar. I'm booking the company my strip club stuff. But
Okay,
anyway,
so
yeah, here we go.
AI, Google AI tells me that Booz Allen issues included improper billing and false claims,
Oh, there we go.
procurement fraud,
What?
data leak and tax information, improper layoffs, and whistleblower complaints.
Right. So
There's a lot. That's why neither
yeah,
one
but
of
you
us
could
are up on it.
probably
But
there's
that's
probably
it.
versions of all of this in the NFLPA issue, especially those top three
All
issues.
those
Yeah,
things, exactly
yeah,
what they're
exactly
alleging
right. So
against
pattern.
them.
So this guy, now this is what he was coming from. Okay, this wasn't out. This wasn't secrets, right? This is why he's leaving his cush CFO job at Booz Allen, right? So he comes in with that baggage.
And the thing is that yes, these are a bunch of dumb players, and you could argue that maybe they should have done their research on the guy. But however, they're also relying on their leadership to provide accurate and complete information about the people they're being
And that's
presented,
this J.C. Treader. That was his
which
role
they
of
didn't,
smoothing that over. Let's
which
say.
they didn't do.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the players, there are players quoted in here saying, I didn't know any of this. I'm stunned. They liked Hal on the job because they weren't really aware of what they were doing, what Hal was doing, and they didn't know about his background. They didn't know about the sexual discrimination lawsuit. um,
They like that
and
he was a money guy.
and that's fair,
Yeah.
because part of, and again, I'm no union, I don't no union fan, but what there has been the negotiations between the NFL owners and the union have historically been a bit imbalanced. I would say, if that's a proper characterization, because the owners are a bunch of billionaire businessmen, and then the union reps are a bunch of dumb players, and a lot of times they focus on the wrong things, and they get kind of bamboozled in negotiations. And so the point here is that by Hal being quote business guy means that he's used to negotiating with those people, and the thought was they could do better in negotiations. And that part is probably true, but what they were not told is that the guy is corrupt. We can summarize it in saying guy was allegedly corrupt, and they didn't know that.
Yeah,
But
and if you go into the this is like, I mean, I think this is like a in total Don Banana. He's on the story basically. He's broke every piece of this. Him, and he's got some co-writers at ESPN. Um, and Don Banana was huge in the Snyder stuff. If you remember, if that name is ringing familiar to you as
he
you followed
was,
those
yeah.
stories. So, but he's on this one now, and there's been 5 or 6 articles already. And yes, even the one that was published last night, Friday night for us, that really just kind of updated on some of these potential criminal charges, which is kind of an update story, is still long, but he's a long form guy. But what I think they're really tracking here is there's also been a fight about how they pick leaders. Now, you could make a case that NFLPA's top two best union bosses were players: Gene Upshaw, who's was the rep for a long time, and DeMaurice Smith, who was the next. I think he was. I
I
mean,
don't think
no,
DeMaurice
maybe
Smith
no,
was
I'm wrong
not.
about that.
DeMaurice
Yeah,
Smith's an
yeah,
attorney.
that's right.
Upshaw
Smith,
is your point.
Upshaw,
Upshaw is
yeah,
the one that
is
was.
their most successful union president, and I think there was a strong contingency before Hal's hiring, and now with this whole thing, that I think we see some players probably start to emerge. Matt Schaub spoke in the Vanetta article about being pretty frustrated about being kind of quickly passed over by the search firm when they got to Hal. By the way, same search firm they're now relying on to come up with the interim director.
Who decided that was a decent idea?
And did you see that? Did you notice their bill? So it's $500,000 to find an interim director. That's
That
their
doesn't
fee.
surprise me.
Yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me either, but it just gives context.
It's a heck of a lot of money
Yeah.
for that.
So,
Considering they probably have a team of what, 5 to 10 people,
oh
doing it.
yeah, Totally. The sourcing. So anyway, so it's really the scab. That's kind of funny. I didn't mean that. The scabs are coming off this story. This is and it's horribly timed for the players union who really should be preparing themselves for upcoming contract negotiations, the crazy speed of the media landscape, the massive revenue that the NFL generates. This is a ridiculously poor time for the union to be hamstrung, and they did it to themselves, quite frankly. And they're gonna, it's gonna take a pretty Herculean effort, because one thing about sports unions in these leagues is that football is the hardest one, right? Because this is the one where the owners have the most leverage by far. Football teams are massive, they're expensive, there's rosters of 53 plus injured reserve plus practice squads. So it's a whole different economy than a 23 player baseball or hockey team or an 11 player basketball team. So a union in pro football situation is always behind the eight ball, even more than you might argue that a union in pro sports is already behind the eight ball.
Well,
So
there's a lot more money involved here, and
right,
the owners
and
just
a lot
have a
more money
lot
that
more
has to go
leverage.
around.
The owners have a lot more leverage.
Yeah.
And by the way, so there's another story. Ex NFLPA boss Hal quits role as consultant for the Carlisle Group by Don Vanetta. Again, this is the other story, July 21st. So he was simultaneously while serving as
Yeah,
the
he had like
executive
five
director.
jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of these guys do that, but it was one of these other groups. I think Carlisle Group maybe was it that got a contract. That now he's serving on both sides. That's called a conflict of interest.
Yeah. And now
Okay,
with VC firms, as we've been talking about, now there's actually even ownership stake. So he was even part of
he was part of
investment.
a VC group, which
Yeah.
you see, I can't find the name right here.
That
He
has
was part
ownership rights in multiple teams.
right, and so what that means is an organization that he was employed by um, has the right to buy into an NFL team while he is serving as the NFLPA boss. There's no bigger conflict of interest than that in this world. There isn't. And so the guy's a scumbag. He deserves to go. I, while not supporting unions generally, feel for the players in this instance. I think they have a right to rely on their leadership and their search teams to tell them the truth about who these people are. The basic idea of getting a business guy in is a decent idea, I think, because again, like we said, they need more leverage. You bring some like retired linebacker in there, it's just not the same. So I get it, but they need to find somebody better than this slime ball who may get. So the criminal part, I would assume here that I'm not an expert on NLRB. This is not my legal world. I would assume the NLRB could probably refer misconduct to the Justice Department. I
I'm
would
sure. Yeah.
assume.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so I think that's what's going on here because the NLRB was involved in this. So I think if the NLRB finds that Hal, um, they find evidence that Hal may have been involved in corruption, criminal activity, that they're going to refer to justice, and that's what they're talking about with the criminal probe. I would think.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think this guy's cooked. I mean, in fact,
Oh,
this,
definitely. Yeah.
I mean, even he's already out of this job, but he's not gonna have any of those. He's not gonna have any of that bouquet of
I hope he
jobs
has a lot of
soon.
savings.
Yeah. Well, he seemed to have made a lot of money. So, and I'd argue, like I'm not as anti putting a player in there as you would be. Actually, if I predict you will see a player as the next, at least interim. But regardless of that, I don't. That's what like a CFO is a little bit different than like chief counsel or or CEOs. CFO is a very specific job even within a C-suite that I don't know is the right makeup for this role.
Yeah. The reason why I think they do be wise to go outside former players in part. I mean, Gene Upshaw's a player, so there's some that could be good, but most of them don't have the breadth of experience in business to be able to negotiate on an even plane with 32 very highly successful billionaires. That's the point. Now, again, Gene Upshaw did it. Not to say you can't find somebody, but generally speaking, if I were the players, I would want somebody like that to represent me. That's what I'm saying.
And there's the the possible lists are already emerging, and two of the ones that are seen even on the shorter of short lists are have worked for the union before, now somewhere else, and come from that kind of profile. And I'm not even like arguing player, not player. I'm just saying like I wouldn't be looking. I wouldn't be sourcing for CFOs from C-suite jobs for this
Now,
role.
this guy wasn't a CFO though. This
He
guy
was at
was
Booz Allen.
at Booz Allen. I
Yeah,
thought
so
you meant
that's his
yeah,
background. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Because the CFO is the money person. That's called chief financial officer.
right. They're the
I
head
think, Chris, what
accountant
you're saying here is, I think, is that the CFO isn't necessarily a leader type. That
or
is
strategy, right?
right. That's
Yeah,
the money guy. And
yeah.
so there's a difference. That's what your point is,
Yes, that's
right?
my point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would want ex CEOs, ex chief
Right.
counsels. Yeah, whatever. I would someone maybe who's negotiated labor from management side. That's an interesting perspective. It just wouldn't be the head accountant.
Yeah. But again, I don't know how many players really know the difference.
I
I mean, seriously,
don't know that
there's
most people know the difference.
no, but especially a bunch of football players who've done nothing with but practice, play football for their whole lives. I'm not even really blaming them. It's just it's not their universe. They see, oh, look, business guy, the end. I think that's probably all it
Yeah.
was.
That's what the reporting says. Yes,
Yeah,
that's reporting says exactly that.
but you
Yeah.
make a good point.
Um. Oh, well, hopefully they get their act together because they're gonna get
They're gonna get mollywopped.
yeah, they're already
Is
walking
that a
into a
word?
bad. You need someone to negotiate the best of a bad situation. That's what you're
And
essentially
and
walking
there's
into
a
that.
there the next negotiation is going to have a ton of money involved. Considering the level of media contracts the NFL is talking about,
And they're opt out, so it's going to
and
get
they're
bigger
yes,
faster.
it's going to be an enormous amount of money, and they would be wise to have the very best negotiating team they can.
So there we go. So get your act together, NFLPA, or else you're going to be sunk, and we'll have
Oh,
robot
do you
players
think
soon
this guy will
enough.
be referred for prosecution?
I
I,
do.
yeah, I do too. We don't know enough about it to know the depths of the potential criminal activity, but it sounds like there's enough there. And listen, only an arrogant, conceited CEO type would think that it's okay to bill $2,300 in expenses for car rides to strip clubs. That takes a lot of chutzpah to think that's okay.
Well, here's
Chris is
I
looking
had
something up on the computer, and there
yeah
was
because it
another
was
while he's
just.
looking. It was another one like for $800. There's more. I mean, the guy clearly has a strip club,
And as I
fetish.
was saying, I was just looking for the article real quick. He had one at Booz Allen. So like this, this isn't even the expense account strip uh, club outings. Are repeat offenders from his Booz Allen days.
Oh, by the way,
Here we
one
go.
thing
Here's the
we
headline I was looking
go
for.
ahead.
This is on July 18th. Did the NFLPA know about Lloyd Howell's Booz Allen strip club misadventures? Like this is even like to your point about like money guy, whatever. Like he they didn't even share or they managed through the due diligence even on these kind of more salacious things, right? Not changing a decimal in a ledger.
Or that, or they did incompetent due diligence.
Well, yeah.
One
Well,
or
I
the
think
other.
that JC Treader, I think they had a plan, right? Like I
Yeah.
think so there was, he was blocking, so to speak.
By the way, so we didn't mention before the Booz Allen allegations came from whistleblowers. And so what a whistleblower, there's federal laws that say if employees, essentially, in so many words, if employees report misconduct and criminal activity to law enforcement, then that they're officially labeled whistleblowers, which means they can't be terminated or have action taken against them. And so part of the allegation with this union business is that the union leadership, JC Treader, did not do a good job in telling them about the whistleblowers either. That was part of the story.
Yeah, I mean, he just so he either
Doesn't it make you wonder if
he
there's like money going back and forth
Oh, I
between the
mean,
two of
it's
them?
you either have to believe that J.C. Treader was, you know, a so dumb that he's like walking around life with the brain full of rocks, or more
There's a reason
plausible,
why he was doing this.
right, and he was intentional about what was known, unknown, not shared, et cetera, et cetera.
Was a
Which
suitcase full of money delivered to his house, the Wire style.
Right, exactly. So, and he was an ex-player. So I think he was an offensive lineman for the Browns, I believe. So interesting stuff. Well, this story's not going away, so we can put a pin in that one because there will be probably be updates on this story as soon as we turn off our microphones,
Oh,
if
there'll
history
be
would tell us.
lots of
Yeah.
new future. It's just business stories about this.
And so we'll finish up with we'll keep playing the hits and the continuing roiling waters of the business of college sports, which we could talk about every episode for the entire
We
episode from
practically
multiple
do
angles.
talk
Yes,
about it every episode.
but this has entered the national conversation again from the bully pulpit of the presidency with an executive order that I think came out as late as Thursday or Friday. Um, Looking to I maybe the best way to say it is to suggest some policy directions for college sports and try to sort of strong arm some of those things into place. Now, this is a big pushback against NIL, but then also, which I think kicked off July 1st, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the new rules around basically
Yeah,
paying
you may be right. Yeah,
college athletes. So that's just a couple weeks old in terms of the operating policy that came out of the House v. NCAA decision that we also talked about. Go back and listen to I think one of the last two episodes, I think two back. We updated on that story. So now we could probably wash, rinse, repeat our conversation from the first story in terms of the why and the
it's not that
effectiveness.
dissimilar.
No, but Steve, why don't you give us a little bit of an
Okay.
update about what is being attempted?
All right. So if you want to read about this, there's a bunch of stories, but I first pulled up NBC News. What to know about Donald Trump's executive order on NIL and college sports. Robert Rohan Nadkarni, dated July 26th. I believe that's somebody new to us, Chris.
Yeah, no, that doesn't ring a
Okay.
bell.
So the president issued an executive order titled Saving College Sports. And in here, the order calls, it says the future of college sports is under unprecedented threat. A sea change, it says recent rulings have unleashed a sea change that threatens the viability of college sports. And so the order calls for various things: prohibiting third parties from engaging in direct pay for play payments to athletes, which the order deems improper; protections on scholarships for non-revenue sports, requiring schools to maintain or increase scholarships for such sports, depending on the revenue; clarification from the NLRB on the employment status of athletes that will maximize the educational benefits and opportunities provided by higher education institutions for athletics; protections for the NCAA from lawsuits by athletes. What does it call for in the immediate future? Nothing in the immediate future. Um, and so what he's basically, I think we can summarize this by saying the Trump's order is geared towards protecting the NCAA against some of the recent court settlements that have very much favored the athletes. And what he's basically trying to order is a limitation on the depth and breadth of who can pay these athletes. Like we said for the Washington stadium executive order, he has no authority to just arbitrarily order any of this. He can issue whatever executive order he wants, but there's nothing to order. Okay. He doesn't have the authority to order the NCAA. The NCAA is not a governmental institution. The NCAA is a private association. He has no authority to tell them to do anything. And he has no authority to oppose court settlements of lawsuits. So this is, like you said, we could repeat the same exact thing. This is, I don't think this is Donald Trump spouting off in the middle of the night. I think what this is really a shot across the bow of the judicial arm, which he really doesn't like, because it's the court system that has held back his agenda in large part, sometimes inappropriately so. But I think it's really less about the NCAA and more about him giving a shot to the courts for all these lawsuits. That's what I think.
Oh, I think he loves lines in the sands with the judiciary. So,
Yes, that's what this really is that, not necessarily the
yeah,
NCAA.
I wouldn't necessarily deny that. I do think, I mean, he's been saber rattling on this for a couple months. If most of you might recall that much of the saber rattling began after he had a White House meeting with Nick Saban, who, by the way, just in the last 24, 48 hours, at least of the recording of this, said, maybe I will get back into college coaching. So I found that interesting. Um,
I don't know why he would. I mean, I do ego, but and
no, I
money.
mean, well, he said because he sees sanity, sanity in some of these law,
Well, my
basically
point is like sometimes when you've had the best, most successful career and one of the most successful careers in the history of college football, maybe you ought to not come back from it.
I just think Nick Saban is the whisperer behind all of this. I think at least for Trump's
Possibly, yeah,
thinking. That's my
possibly.
point. So, but I actually think Steve it has less teeth than the name RFK deal.
Oh, I do too.
At least there's like we talked about there's mechanisms, there's levers to pull. Whether they're successful or not is a different discussion. But here I think and what I find is super kind of just politically unastute is that you're already going to get if the I think it's the Score Act, which is there's versions in both the House and the
I
Senate.
was going to get to that. Yeah, so there is a bill in the House or in the Senate that is it's called the Score that the House one is called the Score Act, and then Ted Cruz and Cory Booker have one that's similar in the Senate.
So this is that's so which will have more teeth is the proper way to do it. Looks like it's bipartisan, so I actually don't see a lot of roadblocks to this. Both sides
Well, Ted
will
Cruz and Cory Booker working
right.
together means there's a lot of agreement.
Both sides will want to, like they like to brag about bipartisan wins as they run for reelection. So these are easy layups, and it's not hard for them to believe these things. And it basically does all the things the executive or most of the stuff the executive order will do, which is then to me really interesting because to your point about like just let the process out. Like if you actually cared about this issue, which I and might be debatable whether how much he cares, but if you actually care about this issue, that is the much more sustainable, process driven, within the rules of how things are done way to if your end goal, which Steve, I think you probably agree with most of those things in terms of the end goal, in terms to rein some of this in, then that is the which and it has momentum, then let that process. Why muddy the waters with a toothless executive order when you already have the real pulpit to get this legislation through to do the same thing and you can still brag about it and sign it.
Well, yeah. I don't know if I don't know whether Trump thinks it's toothless or not. I mean, I don't know if the people around him have enough courage to tell him the truth, or whether he really thinks this is going to matter. Again, Trump is not stupid, so I have to think he knows. I have to think he probably knows it doesn't mean anything, and he's doing this to make a point. And again, I think the point really is less about the NCAA and more about I'm done with the court system. I think that's the point. And the truth is, I don't even think the federal government, the legislature should get involved. Let the NCAA fight it out. This is not a federal government issue to me. If I'm on some basic level, should the federal government pass a bill that says, student athletes shouldn't be paid? They could, but why? I don't know. I'm for less government, not more.
I would agree with you on that one, but you would agree that if you're going to do it from a governmental perspective, the
The way
legislator
to
is a
do it is
better
clearly
path.
absolutely. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, all these executive orders. I mean, I think are don't reflect well on the president. He's done a lot of good things in his second term, and Chris, you probably disagree, but I mean, certainly from my perspective, he has. But the enormous amount of ridiculous executive orders. If this one is one, the Washington tweet or whatever is another. It doesn't help, and it doesn't accomplish anything. And I
and they're
think it would
easily
be wise to
reversible.
slow.
So if you're actually looking to
I
change
don't
the
even know what he's
way,
ordering. To be honest, I don't even know what's being ordered in this thing.
no, it's just like no, I don't necessarily either.
It's
And
just
I
like a 12th grader threw a essay together for class, and okay, here it is.
one thing I find interesting is from a slightly different angle is looking at the NCAA. Is we talked about even when we talked about that House, House is a name, not a legislative body in this context. The House lawsuit, they're kind of, basically allowed players to be paid, that the NCAA seemed awfully complicit, right? They seemed sort of like roll over and play dead, take it, oh, okay, new system. But to me now you see, how many of their lobbyists had people, both in the Congress and the executive branch. You kind of see their counter strategy here, right? Like it's almost like let the figure you're going to lose the lawsuit, have like a okay whatever, we're just blowing it open to the free market and we're just paying everybody and we'll figure it out. And college sports are now quasi, or not even quasi, or professional sports, and they seemed awfully like okay sure. And now we're starting to see they had a governmental blockage and path here too, that you could now see their strategy, I think, with a little bit more clarity about how and then the article also goes on to say that they're looking for they're looking for the same kind of, I can't remember the word off the top of my head, but they're looking for the same kind of deal that the pro leagues get, right, with the so that you really, I'll give them credit. I don't agree with any of it, but I think you can really see that the NCAA had to get behind mommy federal government skirt and see if they can get what they want that way. And I
which
think,
is pathetic
but
in my
may
view.
be somewhat effective. But yeah, you can. To me, it's really interesting. You can see where they put their energy.
Yeah, because they really rolled over and died on it, didn't
Right, which
they?
I think was intentional. It was a playing possum move.
Well, and because they didn't have to do all the things they did.
But
There was a
Steve,
way to do a limited rollout, and they didn't at all. They just unzipped their entire fly and dropped their pants to the floor.
and here's why I think, here's this, getting conspiratorial perhaps, although I don't think it's that implausible. But I think they rolled over on that front because the end result, think of folks like you, and I think there's folks like you, even closer to me on a spectrum, that are uneasy with some of this
You and
stuff.
I come around all the way around, on this anti-government
Yes,
thing a little bit.
but what resulted from that House settlement was such unabashed professionalization of college athletics that, from a public perception standpoint, and oh, this is something that needs to get fixed. It's almost like they allowed that to play out, so they had the worst case scenario was already what was rolling out on July 1st.
Get the worst out there.
Yes, and
Maybe,
then
yeah.
people don't want to see that, right? Oh no, that shouldn't be the case. We should protect smaller. I mean, I'll think of all the angles. We should support women in sports, smaller sports. We should have those. We shouldn't, you shouldn't be making 10 million to play quarterback for University of Alabama. Now that that's all the reality out there in front, it's much easier from a public relations, which is what legislative law, getting laws passed is. So I think they accepted the crazy there without much of a perceived fight because they knew it would speed up the counter reaction.
And in other news, 10 people killed John F. Kennedy. Uh, and maybe I think you're maybe giving him too much credit.
Well, that
People.
right. That's where I'm on a shaky limb. I would
Yeah, I
agree.
know
That's
because
my weak point, that I'm giving
it
it's
is
definitely too
because
much credit.
it's a very nice thought, and it's an intelligent thought. The problem is the people who run the NCAA have been idiots for generations. So that's the problem. I don't know if I think they're just stupid more
Right.
than anything.
I'm falling into the thinking people are playing three-dimensional
You wrote a
chess when
decent
they're playing
Hollywood.
checkers.
You wrote a decent Hollywood movie there in your head. Like Oliver Stone would be proud.
uh, we just got to get Boyd Howell in there somewhere, or whatever his name is.
He's got to be involved one way or
Yeah,
the
yeah, you
other.
got. He's a side character. Um, but it is interesting. I do think, even if my wild flights of fantasy are mostly that, I do think we at least do see what they thought their better path is to a governmental system, and that they would like better, and
They
they need
just
the
could
federal
have done
government's
it.
help.
They could have done it in a less ham-fisted manner,
Yeah,
and in a way that didn't completely destroy the amateur aspect of collegiate athletics.
and to hide behind the mommy skirt of the federal government
Yes,
here. Yeah,
you
which
really
is
love that quote, don't you?
it's a
That's the
good one.
second. That's like the
Yeah,
second or third time you said
yeah, it's a good one.
it.
Um, I'm like, that's some small C conservative thinking by me, Steve.
Kind of a little bit. That's frightening.
um,
And
so
me defending the rights of union members. I mean, well, I don't
I
know
know,
what's
right,
going
right,
on
right.
here
It's
today.
an invasion of the body snatchers. Um, yeah, I don't. Do I think the What I do think, here's where I'll give the president some credit. I do think the bully, him making an issue of this has potential to keep it front burner. I do think he can, because he's seen as a sports guy and stuff like that, right? Like I
Sort
think
of.
yeah, right, yeah. Go watch the 2009 30 for 30 small potatoes who killed the USFL.
It was
Um,
Donald, to spare you everybody the details, Donald Trump killed the
yes,
USFL.
it's a
I agree with
fascinating
you there. Yeah.
documentary. Um, But I do think he can center a conversation here. And if he does continue to pick at this, and he has picked at this since I think about February, right? So this isn't totally out of the blue. Remember you talked about the commission and stuff like that. So and Nick Saban and all that. So I do
It's
I
not
do
totally
think he
born
has
insanity either, though.
I do, yeah. I do think he has an opportunity to help shape the narrative here. I do think that. No, can he fiat these policies into place? No, but I do think he can potentially use the bully pulpit here.
Can he wish it kind of in like will it into existence through a bully pulpit? Maybe.
Hey, listen, if I was the president and my hit rate was 1 out of 4 with my crazy midnight ideas, as you put them, I'd keep shooting them too.
That's what it is. It's a
Yeah,
bunch of crazy
well,
midnight
enough
ideas.
hit, right?
Yeah.
It's like playing scratch offs. Occasionally,
Kind
you
of.
win $500.
That's way better odds than scratch offs. You kidding me?
Yeah. Fair, right? That was the odds, maybe lines down the block.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I'd invest in scratch offs. I've always thought like a billionaire needs to get together and buy 260 million lottery tickets. And once the lottery gets up to about $1 billion, buy
And just
every
like
ticket.
corner the market on it, basically.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be that. Now there's a movie script for you.
Somebody in Hollywood take that up.
Right there you go. We're
That would
dropping.
really irritate the entire planet.
Right. No, no existing IP. Just the ideas are fresh off our heads. Um, all right, Steve. I think this much laughter means we probably come to an end. Um, so I imagine on the Hogstye you're on the Terry McLaurin watch
Well,
24/7 at this
yeah, I
point.
mean, we started training camp watch, obviously, so there's a bunch of issues, and certainly there's Terry McLaurin watch. Will he get a contract? Will he not? As the world turns.
Would you give no with the no with the caveat that all this money is crazy and nobody? So yes, we understand all that. I think if they're viewing, I would have no problem even from the team's perspective at a 30 to 31 million. If he's asking for somewhere in there, somewhere above the T Higgins and maybe right at or slightly below the Metcalf number, then I think the team's being stupid.
um, First of all, I called his value 2 months ago in a column. I told everybody his value is between 30 and 35 million a year. Um, I went through the comps. I think you're right. I don't think the issue is that. I think the issue is age and contract length, probably. He's 29. He's got a year left. That means he'd be 35 when the contract's up. And so that's probably more the issue because the team gets that his market value is somewhere north of 30 million. They know that. And so I think the issue probably is contract length and maybe guaranteed money on top of it because you have to structure it in a way they could cut him, like in age 34, 35, and he probably doesn't want that. So there's that. But it's not an emergency. I don't respect players who hold out. And like I said on the Hawks, and we got to end this because we're out of time here. But if I were an NFL owner, I would tell everybody up front, if you hold out, I will not negotiate with you. I will not. We will have zero negotiations until you return to work. That's just would be my policy as an owner. That's what they ought to do to McLaurin. They ought to fine him the full amount they can fine him every day.
Well, they're mandated to. That was one thing the union
Yeah.
lost on, so they can't even
Yeah.
they can't even waive it. So,
Right.
speaking of weak union bargaining power, they allowed their holdout rights to be completely diminished in the last collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah. True. And the last thing is, I'd like to thank Kobe the dog, which slept
Kept pretty
literally
quiet.
Well,
Yeah.
he slept literally on top of my foot for about 50 minutes of our show here. So my foot is asleep because he's been laying on it. But I would like to thank our third cast member for remaining silent.
Well, there we go. All right, and we will see you in 2 weeks.